The hyena reached the carcass long before it committed to it. It circled wide at first, nose low, ears upright, body loose but ready. The dead animal lay in the open, a dark shape pressed into the dust, hide already stiffening, limbs folded at wrong angles. It had been here for hours, maybe longer, long enough for scent to spread, long enough for others to know. Normally, the night would answer this scene, wind would carry information, insects would rise, distant movement would signal competitors closing in. Tonight, nothing answered. The hyena slowed its circle, paws placing carefully, claws clicking softly on stone. Its head tilted slightly as it listened, not just for sound, but for the absence of it. The savannah night usually breathed, grass whispered, small animals shifted, even silence had depth. This silence did not. It lay flat and complete, pressing inward instead of spreading outward. The hyena felt it along its spine, a faint pressure that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with awareness. The carcass smelled ripe, blood had cooled, gases had begun to build beneath the hide. The scent was strong enough that the hyena's mouth watered instinctively. Hunger answered immediately, sharp and familiar. This was opportunity, but opportunity in the open was never simple. The hyena stopped downwind of the carcass and stood still. Its shoulders hunched slightly, posture neither aggressive nor relaxed. It did not lower its head to feed. Not yet. Something was wrong. No flies buzzed, no beetles crawled, no jackals called from the edges. Even the vultures that often lingered late into dusk were gone. The sky above was empty, stars sharp and unmoving. Moonlight lay thin across the plain, bright enough to reveal shape but not enough to hide movement. The hyena circled closer now, tightening the loop. Each step should have stirred something, sent rodents scurrying, insects lifting, grasshoppers clicking away from danger. Instead, the ground accepted the movement without response. The night stayed still. The hyena's ears rotated independently, tracking not sound, but potential. This was the kind of stillness that preceded something, not an attack, but a rival. In these conditions, predators did not announce themselves early. They waited. The hyena reached the carcass and stopped just short of contact. Its nose hovered inches above the hide. The smell was overwhelming now. Meat, blood, decay, dust. Still, the hyena did not bite. Feeding meant commitment. Head down, focus narrowed, awareness sacrificed. A lone hyena could be killed quickly if it misjudged the balance of power around a carcass. Normally, the night would help judge that balance. Tonight, it offered nothing. The hyena stepped back one pace and sat briefly on its haunches, posture upright, head raised. It scanned the darkness beyond the carcass, not the object itself, but the space around it. Nothing moved. No lions shifting in grass, no leopards slipping through shadow, no rival hyenas calling in response to scent. The stillness was complete enough to feel artificial. The hyena stood again and resumed circling, this time closer, tighter, every sense stretched outward. It passed the carcass from another angle, then another, testing whether the silence broke at any point. It did not. The hyena's tail lowered slightly, not in fear, but in focus. Muscles along its neck tightened. Hunger pressed harder now, arguing for action. But instinct argued back. Carcasses were never alone. If the night was quiet, it meant something was listening. The hyena paused directly opposite the carcass, placing it between itself and the open plain. This was deliberate. If something charged, the dead animal would block part of the approach, buying a fraction of time. The hyena waited. Seconds passed, then minutes. The night remained still. This was worse than noise. Noise could be interpreted. Stillness could not. The hyena did not know yet whether the silence meant safety or a test. But it understood one thing clearly, that the usual rules around a kill had been suspended. And as it stood there, circling without feeding, eyes bright, jaw clenched, hunger balanced against caution, the hyena faced a choice that would define the rest of the night. whether to break the stillness itself and risk drawing whatever the darkness was withholding, or to keep circling, waiting for the night to move first and reveal whether the carcass truly belonged to anyone at all. The hyena chose not to feed. Not yet. Not. It resumed its slow circuit, widening the loop again, stepping farther from the carcass as if to see whether distance would loosen the night's grip. Sometimes silence broke only when space changed. Sometimes what waited preferred a certain radius. Nothing changed. The carcass lay where it was, untouched and accusatory. The plain around it remained empty of motion, as if the night had been pressed flat. Even the smell, strong as it was, seemed contained, heavy, not spreading the way it should. The hyena stopped and lifted its head higher, scenting the air above ground level. Warmth still clung low, trapping odour close to the earth. Without wind, smell pooled instead of travelling, creating pockets of information that led nowhere. This explained some of the quiet, but not all of it. The hyena's ears flicked once as it shifted weight from one foreleg to the other. Muscles remained loose, ready to spring backward rather than forward. Forward movement meant commitment. Backward movement preserved options. In the distance, a single star winked behind thin cloud, then reappeared. The sky remained otherwise unchanged. No owl crossed overhead. No bat flickered through moonlight. Even the insects seemed to have decided that this was not a night to announce themselves. The hyena felt exposed in a way it did not often feel, not because it was alone, hyenas were used to operating alone, but because nothing else acknowledged its presence. Predators and scavengers normally registered each other indirectly, through sound, through movement, through tension in the environment. Here, the environment refused to register anything. The hyena angled its path so that it crossed its own tracks, checking whether it had missed something earlier. The dust held its paw prints clearly. No other tracks overlaid them, no lion pads, no heavy cat marks, no drag lines suggesting the carcass had been claimed and abandoned. That should have been reassuring. It wasn't. Unclaimed food rarely stayed unclaimed for long. If nothing had come yet, it meant either the night was empty, or something powerful enough to suppress activity was nearby. The hyena stopped again and lowered its head, teeth briefly touching the carcass's hide. Just a test. The skin was tough, already cooling, but not yet dry. The hyena tugged lightly, then released. The sound of tearing hide should have travelled. It should have drawn reaction. It didn't. The noise died instantly, swallowed the same way every other sound had been swallowed. The hyena froze, head lifted sharply, body rigid now. That single sound had been the most decisive test so far, and the night had answered it with nothing. The stillness was not fragile, it was dominant. The hyena stepped back slowly, disengaging, heart rate elevated but controlled. Feeding now would mean lowering its head for long seconds at a time, blind to approach, deaf to warning. That risk was too high. The hyena chose patience instead. It moved a short distance away and sat again, this time with its back to a low rise that limited what could approach unseen. From here, it could watch the carcass without committing to it, and watch the plain beyond without turning away. Hunger gnawed harder now, sharpening awareness rather than dulling it. The hyena's jaws flexed once, muscles clenching and releasing. This food would not last forever, but neither would the night stay like this indefinitely. Something would have to give. Either the silence would break, revealing who else was listening, or dawn would begin to thin the darkness, shifting the balance again. Until then, the hyena waited. Not because it lacked courage, but because experience had taught it that when the night stayed still for too long, the first animal to act often paid the highest price. And the hyena had survived long enough to know that eating was only useful if you lived long enough to finish. Time passed without measure. The hyena remained seated near the low rise, body angled so one eye stayed on the carcass and the other on the open plain. Its posture had shifted from cautious curiosity to something more deliberate. This was no longer a question of hunger versus fear. It was a question of control. The night continued to hold its breath. No wind rose, no insects returned. Even the smell of the carcass seemed muted now, heavy and trapped, as if the air itself refused to move it outward. The hyena felt the pressure of that restraint. In normal conditions, scavenging was noisy. Teeth cracked bone, growls echoed. Competitors announced themselves early, posturing from a distance before committing. Conflict was visible, audible, negotiable. This silence allowed no negotiation. The hyena stood slowly, joints straightening with care, and began another circle, wider than before, deliberately expanding the perimeter. Each step tested whether the stillness weakened with distance. It did not. The darkness beyond the carcass remained empty, but emptiness itself had begun to feel structured, as if the plain were being held in place by something unseen. The hyena's ears rotated again, catching only its own movement, then snapping back to stillness. The hyena stopped and looked directly into the open ground beyond the carcass. This was when it understood. Nothing was moving because nothing wanted to be noticed. That realization settled heavily. Predators did not all avoid a carcass unless there was reason. Silence of this depth did not belong to safety. It belonged to hierarchy. Somewhere nearby, close enough to matter, far enough to remain unseen, something dominant was present. Not feeding yet, not revealing itself, simply holding the night in check. The hyena did not snarl or call. Calling would have been a challenge, and challenges required knowing who you were challenging. Instead, the hyena adjusted its position again, placing the carcass fully between itself and the most open direction. This was not submission. It was geometry, minimizing exposure, maximizing reaction time. The hyena's hunger sharpened into irritation now, but it did not cross into recklessness. Hunger could be postponed, injury could not. Minutes stretched further. At last, the hyena noticed a subtle change, not in sound, but in pressure. The air felt slightly heavier on one side of its body, as if displaced. No scent accompanied it. No movement confirmed it. But the absence shifted. That was enough. The hyena took a step back, then another, increasing distance from the carcass without turning away. This was a calculated withdrawal, slow enough not to provoke pursuit, steady enough to signal awareness. The night remained still. Nothing followed. That confirmed the final piece. Whatever held this place did not need to chase. Its presence alone was enough to deny access. The hyena stopped retreating and stood still once more, now farther from the carcass, eyes fixed forward, body composed. It had read the message correctly. This was not a carcass to be claimed. It was a boundary. The hyena did not leave the area yet. It would not run blindly into the dark. But it had already made its decision. When the night finally moved, when sound returned, or dawn diluted the silence, this place would belong to something else. For now, survival meant recognition. The hyena lowered its head slightly, not in defeat, but in acceptance of a hierarchy enforced without violence, without sound. The night stayed still, and because the hyena understood what that stillness meant, it stayed alive, carrying its hunger elsewhere, leaving the carcass untouched in a silence that was no longer mysterious, but explained. The hyena did not flee. It did not hurry, did not glance back repeatedly, did not show the sharp signals of panic that might invite pursuit. Instead, it did something far more deliberate. It disengaged, one step at a time. The hyena turned its body sideways to the carcass and began to move away at a measured walk, head still high, ears alert, posture controlled. This was not retreat in weakness. It was a withdrawal that acknowledged presence without challenging it. The night allowed it. No sound followed. No movement revealed itself. No warning came. That, more than anything, confirmed the decision. Whatever held the silence did not need to assert itself. The space itself was doing the work. The hyena increased distance slowly, choosing a path that stayed near shallow rises and scattered brush, places where approach could be seen before it happened. Its muscles remained loose but ready, prepared for a sudden change that never came. The carcass remained behind, a dark shape pressed into dust, untouched and unclaimed in appearance only. The hyena did not look back once it passed a certain point. Looking back would have been unnecessary. The message had already been delivered. As the hyena moved farther from the site, something subtle began to change. Sound returned first. A faint rustle of grass, the click of an insect somewhere near the ground, the distant call of a night bird testing the air. Not all at once, but enough to be noticed. The stillness weakened with distance. This confirmed what the hyena had already understood. The silence was localized, deliberate, held in place around the carcass like a perimeter. Outside of it, the night behaved normally again. The hyena stopped briefly and stood listening. Here, sound had depth again. Space could be read. Movement would announce itself. The pressure that had flattened the world earlier lifted from the hyena's senses. The danger had not followed. The hyena resumed walking, angling away toward territory where scavenging would be louder, messier, more honest. There would be other opportunities, smaller, harder won, but not wrapped in this kind of enforced quiet. Hunger remained, sharp but manageable. Living to eat tomorrow mattered more than eating tonight. Behind the hyena, the carcass remained where it was, still surrounded by a pocket of silence that would eventually be broken, by dawn, by whoever claimed it, or by the slow return of normal night sounds. The hyena did not need to know which. It had read the night correctly, and in a landscape where survival depended as much on recognizing absence as presence, the hyena had made the only choice that mattered, to leave without turning the stillness into a test of courage. The night stayed still, but the hyena moved on, and, because it did, it carried its life forward, intact, alert, and wise enough to know that sometimes the loudest signal was the one that never made a sound at all.